Hi, and thanks for your interest in this presentation. My name is David, and I'm the Regional ECLO for Wales and Borders region. I began researching this subject back in the summer of 23. For years, my old sponsor and I had talked about our feeling that there was a systemic problem within our service structure, but we never got past a few cursory calculations. About 6 months ago, I took my initial findings to the region and was given the green light to create this presentation. Since then, conference questions for 2024 have been released, and question 1 of Committee 1 made clear that the time had come to share my findings. I'd like to thank the Survey Committee, the Borthwick Institute, GSO and various GSOs around the world for their help. If you have any questions about this presentation, please don't hesitate to contact me at ecom.wb@aamail.org. We'll be spending some time defining the scale of the service problem before moving on to the facts. Lastly, I'll put forward a few suggestions about the changes the Fellowship might want to consider to resolve the problem. I think it goes without saying that in AA in the UK we have a significant difficulty filling service roles. I've researched this among many international GSOs and the problem seems to be consistent across the world. But why? Well, these are some of the reasons usually cited. But are they valid? Is it fair to blame the membership alone? With this in mind, I undertook some research to find out. My own experience showed that these comments weren't always justified. Certainly there are members who do fit these criticisms, but this certainly isn't the whole picture. While many members will be familiar with this diagram, I like to revisit it before going on to talk about the problem. It's important to understand that the AA service structure, that's not the structure of AA, but the service structure, is very different to the structure of other organisations. AA does not really have a head office. There is no governing body in the way that there is in other places. Our triangle is inverted. This means that essentially the groups are in charge and not the General Service Board. It is the groups who make decisions on how AA operates, and this is achieved through the process of the annual conference. Our structure is also different to AA in most other countries, since we have incorporated intergroups. Intergroups in other nations generally sit outside of the service structure. Sadly, had we followed the suggestions by Bill, we would have GSRs meeting at what we would call the region level, thereby connecting GSRs directly with conference delegates. Incidentally, this may go some way to explaining the disconnect between the group's GSRs and regions. However, despite these differences, my research has shown that even countries with the more common structure experience similar difficulties with filling service positions. So, first, let's establish the scale of the problem in filling service roles. To do this, I simply use the confidential directory. Sadly, information for filled service roles doesn't exist for groups, but as you'll see from later slides, there is clearly a problem at group level also, perhaps an even worse one. Let's first take a look at the number of service roles required at the group level. There are 8 service roles at group level, defined in the AA Structure Handbook for the UK. According to the Survey Subcommittee, we currently have approximately 5,500 groups. However, more recent figures suggest that this number is closer to 5,000. However, sticking with the 5,500 figure for now, this creates a total of 44,000 service roles at group level. On the next level down the service structure, we have intergroups. There are 18 roles at intergroup level and a total of 119 intergroups. This equates to 2,142 intergroup service roles in the UK. Next, we have the regions. The handbook describes 21 service roles at region level. There are 17 regions, which gives us a total of 357 roles. Lastly, we'll add in the subcommittees. There are 16 subcommittees with a maximum of 8 positions per committee. This gives us a total of 128 service roles. So let's add these up. We have 44,000 group service roles, 2,142 intergroup roles, and 357 roles at region. This alone, without the subcommittees, gives us a total of 46,647 service roles. So why is this a problem? Well, according to the last survey, the membership of AA in the UK is estimated at around 24,000. Commonly quoted is the figure of approximately 30,000. Sticking with the survey figures for now, the survey also states that of the 24,000, approximately 20,000 members have over a year of sobriety. This is important since the suggested minimum amount of sobriety time for many service roles is 1 year. This leaves us with a deficit of over 26,000 service roles. To be clear, we appear to have 26,000 more service roles than we have available members to fill them. Even if the membership figures are as high as 30,000, we have to ask ourselves if it's reasonable to expect every AA member over a year sober to take on a service position to help resolve this problem. In addition to this, we should also be aware that there exists a wealth of other service roles that are not included or assessed in the survey. This includes things like convention committees, intergroup subcommittees and working groups, informal service roles like greeters, chips and social secretaries, telephone responders, sponsors, and alcoholic board members, as well as many more. And while membership numbers are best guesses, we can use these figures to get a rough idea of how many members there are per group on average, thus giving us an idea of where the initial source of the shortfall may have begun. What we see from the two graphs is that the average number of members per group has generally fallen since the 1980s. This problem creates multiple additional ones. A lack of service officers means that there is often no one to update meeting information. This makes it harder for newcomers to find AA. Without enough servants to undertake the work, our ability to carry the message into society is handicapped. Without good communication, and sometimes even hostility towards service bodies, engagement with service and with events such as conventions and workshops is compromised. The knock-on effect is that fewer and fewer people become involved in service. Without sufficient interaction with the groups and other service officers, it's easy to feel unsupported and alone when undertaking service. This leads to members leaving service positions and feeling generally disenfranchised with service in general. Without sufficient representation at intergroups and regions, groups are disconnected from the decision-making processes. Decisions are then often criticised and the groups feel less and less connected to intergroups and regions and so disengage further. Ultimately, this all leads to a general apathy around service and a distinct feeling of them and us. As members are so often asked to do service and criticisms abound as to lazy membership, etc., it's understandable that members feel demotivated and so do not come forward for service. Additionally, some intergroups and regions ban members from holding more than one service position. Considering the deficit, this seems to be counterproductive. Also, GSRs are encouraged to resign from their role as GSR when taking on other service positions at intergroup. When followed blindly and without an alternate GSR in place, groups may quickly become less well connected. As I mentioned earlier, there also exists a wealth of other service roles and responsibilities that we haven't factored in. And lastly, I think it's worth recognising that any change is going to be difficult. Not just because of the way AA operates, but also because of a general reluctance to do so. But I believe it is time to recognise that it's unsustainable to continue our current trajectory. Just because something has worked in the past does not mean it will work now, and it's worth noting that all this change can be accomplished without breaking a single tradition. So how has all this happened? As my old sponsor used to say, all you need to start a new meeting is a resentment and a coffee pot. It's very tempting to create new groups, especially in densely populated areas. There may be special reasons for doing so, though. Perhaps it's a special interest group. There may be internal political reasons, or larger venues may simply be too costly to rent. I've often witnessed Tradition 4 being quoted when discussing this issue, but the focus has always been on the autonomy of each group. It occurs to me that perhaps the associated responsibility has been less well understood, or that the information needed to make these decisions has been poorly communicated. Starting new groups without a clear understanding of the current situation, locally or nationally, ignores the fact that we ought to have a view of this in order to avoid affecting other groups or AA as a whole negatively. And since 1950, we have also created multiple new service roles, many of which could have been fulfilled within the existing service positions. It's only right to recognise that there are difficulties in finding accurate figures for the membership of an anonymous fellowship. Various models have been used to calculate the membership numbers in the past. However, even if the figures were off by as much as 20 to 30%, we would still have a significant problem. And it's easy to be parochial about this issue, especially in areas that are more densely populated, where filling service roles might be less difficult. But if we can take a more national, holistic view, we may be able to effect change for the benefit of AA as a whole. We should also recognise that it's believed that there exists a significant number of unregistered online groups, and of course these also create more service roles. So how can we make changes? As I said, change, if any is possible, is not easy. This matter is going to be discussed at conference this year, and that's the main motivation for this presentation. We hope to inform you and motivate you to submit your conference responses. With enough answers, we may be able to begin to make useful and practical changes. Now, I know myself that if it were suggested that my home group should close, I would heartily object. It is a big challenge to ask groups and members to genuinely consider the welfare of AA as a whole, but perhaps simply being less reluctant to close struggling groups may go some way to alleviating the service deficit. Highlighting the problem in these statistical terms to local groups and members may help to curb the enthusiasm of those wishing to start new groups. Many groups meet in the same location, but on different days, so it's possible that groups could be encouraged to merge into multi-meeting groups, a style that's more common internationally, which would thereby reduce the number of service roles. However, I have seen many occasions where this has been tried, and for whatever reason it seems that it just simply doesn't seem to work well in the UK. However, roles such as the GSR and secretary at group level could be merged. It's also worth considering the merger of intergroups, but this would only have a negligible impact on the problem. However, it's notable that a number of intergroups have come close to collapse in recent years. And perhaps we can ask conference to provide guidance on how to prioritise service roles in the various service bodies. This might be complex, but it certainly isn't impossible. Bill famously said that sometimes the good is the enemy of the best. So while on the surface it may be seen as virtuous to start new groups and extend service opportunities, this good is most certainly not the best. I believe we can reasonably conclude the following: that there are too many meetings and not enough groups, that it is almost certainly true that we cannot possibly fill all the service roles that we've created, that we as a fellowship have rarely considered the number of members when making decisions about starting groups or adding service roles, and that the only way we can really begin to make a difference is through the process of conference. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me at ecom.wb@aamail.org. Thank you for taking the time to watch this short presentation. We at Wales and Borders Region hope that you found it useful.